Imagine waking up, just walking downstairs for breakfast, and you are handed a formal, legally worded notice of violation, cure or quit.
Right, like something you'd get from a landlord.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
you haven't failed at your corporate job or anything.
No.
You haven't missed a rent payment on an apartment. You are literally 20 years old. You're standing in your own kitchen, and the person handing you this multi-page document is your mother.
It is just a genuinely staggering scenario to picture. I mean, you're expecting a bowl of cereal.
Yeah, maybe a bowl of cereal.
Or maybe like a nagging reminder to take out the trash. And instead, you're served with paperwork that honestly reads like a preamble to a lawsuit.
It's wild. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Our mission today is to unpack a single, highly unusual document that completely obliterates the line between family dynamics and, well, corporate human resources.
Yeah, obliterates is definitely the right word for it.
We are looking at a source text titled The Corporate Contract of Motherhood, and it was actually written by the 20-year-old college student who was on the receiving end of this paperwork. So I want you, the listener, to just imagine sitting at your own kitchen table and being handed an HR document by your parent.
Just brutal.
Okay, let's unpack this because the core premise here is it's wild. This student's mother didn't just ask him to, pull his weight around the house.
Right.
She issued this formal declaration regarding his housing and her financial support for his college tuition, but she wrapped it entirely in the language of corporate compliance.
What's fascinating here is the sheer mechanism of control being utilized.
Yeah.
By choosing this specific medium, a formalized, printed, legalistic document, the mother is attempting a very deliberate psychological shift.
Yeah, totally.
She's bypassing the messy, emotional, organic communication that, usually defines a family. And she is stepping into the role of a corporate entity, managing an underperforming asset.
An underperforming asset. Wow.
Yeah. She essentially placed her own son on a performance improvement plan, a PIP.
I am so glad you brought up the idea of a psychological shift because the author of our source, he describes this document as completely cold.
Well, yeah.
Clinical transactional. He says it reads exactly like a ruthless HR department trying to build a legal paper trail to terminate someone's employment.
Which is terrifying in a home environment.
Right. But let me push back on this for just a second, because I do want to be fair to the reality of the situation here. Parents setting strict rules for adult children living at home is totally normal.
Sure, it happens all the time.
If you are 20 years old and you're living under your parents' roof, it is entirely reasonable for them to have expectations. I mean, you aren't a child anymore. You should be contributing.
Absolutely.
So isn't there an argument that she's just, setting firm boundaries to help him launch into adulthood?
Well, setting firm boundaries is one thing, but changing the entire operating system of a relationship is another.
Okay, what do you mean by operating system?
So there's this concept in sociology that differentiates between communal relationships and exchange relationships.
Okay.
Families, ideally anyway, operate on communal norms. You do things for each other based on need, empathy, unconditional support.
Right, like you don't charge your kid for a ride to the doctor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But exchange relationships, like the one you have with your boss or your landlord, those are purely transactional. They operate on market norms.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, so when this mother weaponized corporate jargon, she didn't just set a boundary. She forcefully imported market norms into a communal space.
And once you introduce market logic into a family dynamic, you can't really put that genie back in the bottle, can you?
You really can't. Research consistently shows that when you mix social norms and market norms, the market norms almost always take over and destroy the social ones.
Wow.
By framing a parent-child relationship as a literal cure or quit contract, the room for, human error, grace, organic growth, it's entirely replaced by liability and compliance.
Because cure or quit, that's real estate terminology.
Yes, exactly. It signals to the son that their relationship now only exists conditionally. Basically, as long as you meet the terms of this contract to the exact letter.
And if the mother has established this corporate framework, well, she now carries the burden of actually enforcing it.
Right. Which takes a lot of effort.
It does. And in the corporate world, you can't enforce a rule without key performance indicators. So how exactly is she tracking her son's performance?
The tracking is, honestly, the most intense part.
The rules inside this document are incredibly rigid. It includes a business hours mandate.
Business hours for a 20-year-old at home.
Literally. The son is strictly ordered to be either out of the house or actively engaged in what she literally calls productive metrics between the hours of 10:00 a.m. and 4:00 p.m.
Productive metrics.
Yeah.
That phrase just reveals so much about her anxiety as a parent, I think.
Yeah. How so?
Well, when parents feel they are losing physical or emotional control over an adult child, maybe one who's drifting or struggling to launch, they often grasp for systems that offer an illusion of absolute control.
Like numbers and data.
Yes. Numbers, hours, metrics, they feel safe to her. They feel objective.
Objective and relentless. Because here's where it gets really interesting. She didn't just casually notice he was lounging on the couch too much. She essentially ran a forensic timesheet audit on her own son.
An audit.
Yes. According to the source, she calculated an exact deficit of 22 hours for his week.
22 hours.
22 hours, and she demanded a written status update proving that he hit specific volunteer or work quotas before a hard deadline of June 18th.
Let's just think about the reality of what an hourly audit does to a human being,
It sounds exhausting.
especially a 20-year-old whose brain is still very much in development. Young adults need unstructured time.
Right.
They spend time staring at the ceiling, figuring out their majors, or reading aimlessly, or just recovering from social exhaustion. Sometimes they're just daydreaming about their future.
Yeah, that's just part of growing up.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, under a system of strict productive metrics, any activity that cannot be quantified, tracked, and reported on paper is penalized.
So it turns the house into a surveillance state.
Exactly. It fundamentally demands data over actual human growth.
You know, it reminds me of that economic principle Goodhart's law.
Oh, yes.
The idea that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure.
That is the perfect analogy for this household, honestly. If the mother's ultimate goal is for her son to become a mature, well-rounded, responsible adult, she has completely lost the plot by making the metric the goal.
Right, because if the mandate is just to log 22 hours of volunteer work by June 18th, the son isn't going to seek out a meaningful charity that aligns with his passions.
No, of course not.
He's going to find the easiest, most brain-dead way to sit in a chair for 4 hours a day just to get a signature on a piece of paper.
He will optimize for the metric, not for his own life.
He is just filling out a timesheet to keep management off his back.
Which brings us to the inevitable failure of this system. What happens when a human being inevitably falls short of a perfectly optimized timesheet?
Because no one is perfect.
Right. And a corporate framework requires a corporate disciplinary structure.
And the enforcement mechanisms she has put in place are extreme. Let's look at her zero-tolerance policy on tone.
This part is wild.
The contract states that any sarcastic, hostile, or defiant communication will result in an immediate Level 1 threshold violation.
Level 1 threshold violation.
Let's pause right there. How is defiant communication even measured objectively?
It isn't. It can't be.
Because in a real corporation, HR acts as a somewhat neutral third party. If your boss claims you were defiant, HR theoretically has a process to investigate. But at this kitchen table, the mother is the CEO, the HR department, the judge, and the executioner.
I'd actually take that a step further and challenge the idea that HR is a neutral third party anyway.
Really? How so?
The biggest misconception about human resources is that they exist to help the employee. They don't.
Right, they exist for the company.
Exactly. HR exists to protect the company from liability. They mitigate risk for the corporation. So when we look at the mother adopting the persona of an HR department, we have to ask, what liability is she protecting herself against?
Her own son.
Yes.
She is treating him like a bad investment.
She is legally protecting her assets, her house, and her college funds against him. And because she holds all the power, the rules don't need to be objective.
So terms like defiant or hostile tone, those are intentionally subjective.
Intentionally subjective. Authoritarian structures rely on vague, zero-tolerance policies because the rule isn't actually about correcting a specific behavior.
It's about maintaining absolute dominance.
Exactly. It forces the son to constantly police his own facial expressions, the pitch of his voice, his body language in his own home, because any slight sigh could be labeled a level 1 threshold violation.
The psychological toll of having to monitor your own micro-expressions while, just pouring a cup of coffee, that must be exhausting.
It has to be.
And the penalty for slipping up is staggering. The source outlines what we can only call the ultimate threat.
The ultimate threat.
If he violates any of these micromanaged subjective rules, she states she will immediately freeze his college student portal, pull all financial funding for his upcoming semester, and execute an immediate eviction.
We really need to unpack the gravity of that threat.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
This isn't a parent saying, if you disrespect me, I'm taking away the car keys for the weekend.
No, not at all.
This is the threat of dismantling a 20-year-old's entire future in one fell swoop. Education and housing are foundational human needs.
Right.
By holding those specific needs hostage against entirely subjective metrics, like a sarcastic tone, she is operating entirely on coercion.
She is essentially saying, smile when I speak to you, or I will make you homeless and derail your education.
Yes.
That is a terrifying dynamic.
Because compliance in a healthy family environment is usually achieved through mutual respect, shared values, or at least, an understanding of shared responsibilities.
Sure.
In this house, compliance is achieved through existential fear.
Wow. Existential fear.
The son isn't submitting his timesheets because he respects his mother's wisdom. He is doing it because the alternative is complete ruin.
And you can see that emotional devastation right in the source text. The author clearly states he feels betrayed, disgusted, and trapped.
Understandably so.
He actually reached out to the internet, posting this document and asking, is this normal?
He's gaslighting himself.
Right. He is trying to calibrate his own reality because his home life has become so warped and unrecognizable.
Yeah.
And his ultimate conclusion to all of this is heartbreaking, but also incredibly pragmatic. He writes that he just wants to get his school paid for so he can build his runway and get the hell out of here.
Build his runway.
Yeah.
Notice the language he's using there. He has fully assimilated into the corporate structure she forced upon him.
Oh, wow.
He isn't talking about growing up and moving out. He is using startup terminology to plan an exit strategy from a toxic firm.
So what does this all mean for their future? To me, it means the mother's contract actually backfired in the most spectacular way imaginable.
Oh, completely.
She implemented this draconian corporate structure because she presumably wanted a more productive, respectful, engaged son.
Right.
But instead, she created a hostile employee. She now has an employee living in her spare bedroom who despises management, is doing the absolute bare minimum to avoid termination, and is quietly biding his time until he can quit.
It's the domestic equivalent of quiet quitting.
Quiet quitting, yes.
He is going to hit his quotas. He will submit his June 18th paperwork. He will swallow his pride and suppress his sarcasm because the financial stakes are simply too high.
He can't afford not to.
But this raises an important question about the long-term cost of this kind of victory. The mother has successfully secured her son's short-term obedience.
Yeah.
But she has entirely lost the war.
She won compliance, but she traded away the relationship to get it.
That is the tragic trade-off of the cure or quit mentality.
Yeah.
The son has clearly checked out emotionally.
Right, he's just surviving.
Exactly. He is no longer looking at her as a mother to seek guidance from when he stumbles. He is looking at her as a dangerous obstacle to navigate around.
And when you replace empathy and guidance with a legally binding contract, you might get a clean kitchen and a signed timesheet, but you absolutely destroy trust.
Trust is gone, and guidance implies a shared journey,
Right.
It means you expect the 20-year-old to make mistakes, and you help them learn from them. Corporate compliance doesn't care how you feel or what you learn. It only cares that the metric is met.
It makes you wonder how often we do this in our own lives.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Maybe in smaller, less traumatic ways, but still.
Oh.
I want to throw this out to you, the listener. Have you ever found yourself treating a personal relationship like a transaction?
It's easy to do without noticing.
It is. Maybe you aren't drafting multi-page legal documents, but are you keeping a mental ledger of who owes whom? Where is the line between expecting accountability from the people we love and treating them like underperforming assets that need to be audited?
It is a very slippery slope.
It goes from wanting a family member to be responsible to demanding they justify their existence on a spreadsheet.
And it is a vital reflection. Because the corporate world operates on the fundamental assumption of replaceability.
Right. If you don't perform, you're out.
Exactly. If an employee fails to meet the metrics, you terminate them, you open a requisition, and you hire a new one. Families do not have that luxury.
You cannot simply requisition a new son.
No, you can't. The damage done by treating a child, even an adult child, who needs a push like a disposable corporate asset, leaves psychological scars that will dictate the rest of their lives.
Absolutely.
Which leads us to a final structural thought on this situation, specifically regarding the son's plan to build his runway.
His exit strategy from the company.
Precisely. If this mother insists on acting as a ruthless corporate entity, well, she has to accept the reality of how corporate entities are treated by their workers once the power dynamic shifts.
Oh, that's a really interesting point.
What happens on the day her employee finally gets his degree, secures a job, and has enough runway to leave? Think about the corporate world. When an employee finally resigns from a toxic company that audited their time, policed their tone, and threatened their livelihood, what do?
They pack up their desk.
They pack up, they walk out the door, and they usually never speak to their former boss ever again.
They hand in their 2 weeks' notice and they wipe their hands clean of the entire institution.
Right. So sitting at that kitchen table we talked about at the very beginning, has this mother unwittingly drafted the exact paperwork that will justify her son completely ghosting her the moment his tuition is paid?
Hmm.
Because she handed him a notice of violation, cure or quit, but she might just wake up one day to find that he is the one who decided to permanently quit.